I still remember the exact moment I realized my mother had stolen my entire identity. I was standing in the lobby of the Marriott in downtown Portland, watching her accept a crystal plaque from the Oregon Women's Education Foundation. She was wearing my graduation dress, the navy blue one I'd saved up for months to buy, the same dress I'd worn when I walked across that stage at Portland State just 3 months earlier. "This award goes to Linda Morrison," the woman at the podium said, "for her incredible dedication to higher education and her inspiring journey as a first-generation college graduate." First generation, the words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My grandmother had a master's degree in social work, my great-aunt was a teacher, but somehow, in my mother's version of our family history, she was breaking new ground. I watched her smile and wave at the crowd of about 50 women, mostly donors and foundation board members. She looked so proud, so deserving, and I felt like I was going to throw up. The thing is, I should have seen it coming. The signs were there for years, but I kept making excuses for her. I kept telling myself she was just proud of me, that she was living vicariously through my accomplishments, because she never got the chance to have her own. God, I was so stupid. It started small, like it always does with people like my mother. When I was 17 and got accepted to Portland State with a partial scholarship, she immediately started telling people at church that we were going to college. Not that I was going to college, that we were. At first, I thought it was kind of sweet, like she was showing solidarity or something. "Charlotte and I are so excited about this next chapter," she'd say to anyone who would listen. "We've worked so hard to get here." We, always we. I remember feeling uncomfortable about it, but I pushed those feelings down. I told myself I was being selfish. After all, she was going to be paying for the part of my tuition that the scholarship didn't cover. She deserved some credit, right? But then orientation day came, and she insisted on coming with me, not just dropping me off, actually attending the orientation sessions. When other parents said goodbye and left their kids to figure things out on their own, my mother stayed. She sat next to me in every information session. She asked questions about my major, like she was the one planning to study business administration. "What kind of internship opportunities are available for us?" she asked the department advisor. "And how does the mentorship program work for students like us?" The advisor looked confused. "Well, Mrs. Morrison, the programs are designed for enrolled students. Are you planning to audit classes or—" "Oh no," my mother laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "I just like to stay involved in Charlotte's education. We're very close." That night, I tried to talk to her about it. We were in my childhood bedroom, the same room I'd occupied for 18 years, with its faded purple walls and posters of bands I'd outgrown years ago. I was packing the last of my things for the dorm. "Mom," I said carefully, "maybe tomorrow you could just drop me off? I think I need to start figuring some of this stuff out on my own." Her face changed immediately. The warm, proud expression I'd seen all day melted into something cold and hurt. "After everything I've sacrificed for you," she said quietly. "All the overtime I worked to help pay for this. All the times I stayed up late helping you with homework, and now you don't want me involved?" I felt the familiar twist of guilt in my stomach, the same feeling I'd been carrying around since I was old enough to disappoint her, which seemed to be around age 5. "That's not what I meant," I said quickly. "I just thought—" "You thought what? That you did this all by yourself? That you don't need your mother anymore?" And there it was, the thing that had been hanging between us my entire life, but especially since I'd started showing any signs of independence, the suggestion that wanting space meant I was ungrateful, that needing autonomy meant I didn't love her, so I backed down. Of course I did. I let her come to my first day of classes. I let her introduce herself to my professors as Charlotte's mother and biggest supporter. I let her corner my roommate, Jessica, in the hallway and give her a 20-minute lecture about how I was very sensitive and needed extra support during this transition. Jessica looked at me after my mother finally left, and I could see the pity in her eyes, that look that said, "Oh honey, you have one of those mothers." But I wasn't ready to admit that yet. I was still clinging to the idea that my mother's behavior came from love, not something darker. The first semester was rough, but not because of the academics. I'd always been a good student. The hard part was learning how to exist as my own person when my mother called me 3 times a day to check in, when she showed up to campus unannounced to bring me care packages, when she somehow knew my class schedule better than I did and would text me things like, "How did your accounting exam go?" 15 minutes after I walked out of the classroom. I started spending more time at the library, partly to study, but mostly to have somewhere to go where she couldn't find me. It was there, during finals week of my first semester, that I met David Chen from my statistics class. He was struggling with a problem set, and I helped him work through it. Afterward, we grabbed coffee and talked for hours. David was the first person I'd met who seemed genuinely interested in what I thought about things. Not what my mother thought about things, or what she'd taught me to think about things. He asked me questions I'd never been asked before. What did I want to do after graduation? What kind of life did I want to build? What made me happy? I realized I didn't know how to answer any of those questions. I'd spent so much time thinking about what my mother wanted for me that I'd never developed my own wants. Over winter break, I tried to pull back a little. I didn't call home as much. I spent more time with friends from high school who were also back from college. I started thinking about maybe switching my major from business to social work, something that actually interested me. That's when my mother really started to panic. "You seem different," she said one evening when I came home from hanging out with my friend Marcus. "Distant college is changing you, and I don't like it." "Isn't that kind of the point?" I asked. "I'm supposed to be growing and learning new things. Not if it means you're going to forget where you came from. Not if it means you're going to abandon your family." There was that word again, abandon. It was my mother's favorite weapon, the thing she pulled out whenever I showed any signs of becoming my own person. According to her, wanting to spend time with friends was abandoning her. Wanting to make my own decisions was abandoning her. Even wanting to have my own thoughts and opinions was somehow a betrayal. When I went back to school for spring semester, she ramped up the contact even more. The 3 calls a day became 5. She started sending me articles about students who'd gotten into trouble at college, always with a note saying things like, "This is why I worry," or "Promise me you'll be careful." She began showing up to campus more frequently, always with some excuse. She needed to drop off something I'd forgotten at home, usually something I hadn't forgotten and didn't need. She wanted to take me to lunch to catch up, even though we'd talked on the phone that morning. She had questions about my classes that she could only ask in person. My professors started recognizing her. My friends started asking questions. Jessica finally sat me down in our dorm room one night in March and said what I think we'd both been thinking for months. "Charlotte, this isn't normal," she said gently. "My mom calls me maybe once a week. She's never even been to campus except for family weekend." I felt defensive immediately. "My mom and I are just close. There's nothing wrong with that." "I'm not saying there's something wrong with being close, but she acts like she's the one going to college, not you." I wanted to argue with her, but deep down, I knew she was right. I'd started noticing it too. The way my mother talked about my classes like they were her classes. The way she'd say things like, "We got an A on our marketing presentation," when I'd tell her about my grades. The way she somehow always knew more about what was happening on campus than I did, because she'd struck up friendships with people in the admissions office. But acknowledging that felt like admitting I'd been living a lie. It felt like saying my mother didn't really love me. She just loved controlling me. And I wasn't ready to face that truth yet, so I pushed Jessica's concerns aside and tried to focus on finishing my sophomore year. I did well in my classes, made Dean's List both semesters. I thought maybe if I excelled academically, it would prove to everyone, including myself, that I could handle my life just fine, even with my mother's involvement. That summer, I got an internship at a local nonprofit organization. It was unpaid, but it was real work experience, and I was excited about it. When I told my mother, her first question wasn't about what I'd be doing or what I'd learn, it was about the schedule. "What days will you be working?" she asked. "I hope it's not going to interfere with our time together." Our time together, like I was 5 years old and she was planning playdates. The internship was amazing. I worked with people who were passionate about their jobs, who treated me like a competent adult, who gave me real responsibilities. For 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I got to be just Charlotte, not Charlotte and her mother, just me. But every evening when I came home, I had to report back like I was debriefing from a mission. My mother wanted to know everything: what projects I'd worked on, what conversations I'd had, what I'd learned. At first, I thought she was just interested, but gradually I started to notice that she was taking notes, literally. She had a notebook where she wrote down everything I told her about my internship. When I asked her about it, she said she was helping me keep track of my accomplishments for my resume. But then I started hearing her on the phone with her friends, talking about our internship and the work we're doing in the nonprofit sector. She'd tell them about meetings I'd attended, presentations I'd given, problems I'd solved. But she'd tell these stories like she'd been there, like she'd done those things herself. One evening in July, I came home to find her on the phone with her sister, my Aunt Karen. "Oh, it's been such a learning experience," she was saying. "The people at the organization are so impressed with our initiative and creativity. We're really making a difference in the community." I stood in the doorway, listening to her describe a presentation I'd given to potential donors. But in her version of the story, she'd been the one researching statistics and crafting talking points. She'd been the one standing in front of the room, fielding questions from board members. When she got off the phone, I confronted her. "Mom, why did you tell Aunt Karen that you were involved in my internship presentation?" She looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean? You said we gave a presentation. You said we impressed the board. But you weren't there. I did that stuff by myself." Her expression shifted to that familiar hurt look. "Charlotte, you know I'm proud of you when I talk about your accomplishments. It's just my way of showing how invested I am in your success. But you're talking about them like they're your accomplishments. Don't be ridiculous. Of course I know you're the one doing the work, but you wouldn't be able to do any of this without my support, without everything I've sacrificed to get you where you are." And there it was again, the guilt. The reminder that I owed her everything, that my successes were really her successes because she'd made them possible. I wanted to argue, but I didn't have the energy, and honestly, I was starting to doubt myself. Maybe I was being oversensitive. Maybe this was normal mother-daughter behavior, and I was the one with the problem. Junior year started, and things got worse. My mother had apparently decided that since I was getting closer to graduation, she needed to be even more involved in my college experience. She started attending campus events that were open to the public. She joined the Parents Association. She volunteered for fundraising committees. Suddenly, everywhere I went on campus, someone knew my mother. Linda Morrison, the devoted parent who was so passionate about education. Linda Morrison, who cared so much about her daughter's college experience. Linda Morrison, who was basically treating Portland State like her own personal social club. My academic advisor, Dr. Patterson, mentioned it during a meeting about my course selection for spring semester. "Your mother is quite involved," she said, with what I now recognize was careful diplomacy. "She's been in touch several times about your progress." "She has?" I was genuinely surprised. I thought our academic meetings were confidential. "Oh yes, she calls regularly to check on your grades and ask about your plans after graduation. She seems very invested in your education." I felt my face burning with embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that. I didn't know she was bothering you." "It's not a bother exactly," Dr. Patterson said carefully. "But Charlotte, you're 20 years old. You're an adult. These conversations should really be happening directly between you and me." That night, I called my mother and asked her to stop contacting my professors and advisors. "I don't understand why that upsets you," she said. "I'm just making sure you're getting the support you need." "But I don't need that kind of support. I can handle my own academic relationships." "Can you, though? Because you've never had to advocate for yourself before. You don't know how to navigate these systems. What if you miss an important deadline or don't understand a requirement?" "Then I'll figure it out. That's part of learning. I'm not going to sit back and watch you fail because you're too proud to accept help." The conversation ended with both of us frustrated. But I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. I thought maybe she'd back off a little. I was wrong. Instead of calling my professors directly, she started showing up to campus more often. She'd find reasons to be in the buildings where my classes were held. She'd linger in the hallways, hoping to run into my instructors. She'd attend public lectures and seminars, then introduce herself to the professors afterward as Charlotte Morrison's mother. My friends started making jokes about it. Not mean jokes, but the kind of gentle teasing that comes from discomfort. They'd see my mother on campus and say things like, "There's your shadow," or "Looks like you brought backup today." I laughed along with them because I didn't know what else to do. But inside, I was dying of embarrassment. I felt like I had a neon sign over my head that said, "Cannot function without mommy." Spring semester of junior year, I met Professor Williams, who taught a social policy class I was taking as an elective. She was probably in her 50s. With gray hair she wore in a neat bob and the kind of quiet confidence I admired. During office hours one day, she asked me a question that changed everything. "Charlotte," she said, "what do you want to do after graduation?" It was such a simple question, but I found myself stumbling over the answer. "Well, my mother thinks I should look into corporate training programs. She says business is a stable field and—" Professor Williams held up her hand. "I didn't ask what your mother thinks. I asked what you want to do." I sat there in silence for what felt like forever. What did I want to do? The question felt foreign, like she'd asked me to solve a math problem in a language I didn't speak. "I don't know," I finally admitted. "That's okay," she said kindly. "But I think it's something you should figure out, and you should figure it out for yourself, not for anyone else." That conversation stayed with me for weeks. I started paying attention to which classes excited me and which ones felt like obligations. I started noticing that I was drawn to courses about social justice, community organizing, systemic change, not business administration, not corporate training programs. I was beginning to realize that I wanted to work in nonprofit management or maybe go to graduate school for public policy. But every time I tried to bring this up with my mother, she'd shut the conversation down. "Nonprofit work doesn't pay well," she'd say. "You can't build a stable life on good intentions. You need to think practically about your future." But whose future was she really worried about? Mine, or the one she'd imagined for herself through me? Senior year arrived, and with it, the pressure to figure out my post-graduation plans. I started applying for jobs in both business and nonprofit sectors, just to keep my options open, but every application, every interview, every decision became a source of conflict between my mother and me. She wanted to help me write my cover letters. She wanted to drive me to interviews. She wanted to sit in on phone screenings with potential employers. When I told her I needed to handle my job search independently, she acted like I was rejecting her personally. "I just want to help you succeed," she'd say, tears in her eyes. "Why won't you let me help you?" "Because it's not help," I wanted to scream. "It's control. It's ownership. It's you living your life through mine because you're too scared to live your own." But I couldn't say those things. They felt too cruel, too harsh. So I kept trying to find compromises, ways to include her just enough to keep the peace while still maintaining some sense of personal agency. The compromise I settled on was updating her regularly about my job search progress. I'd tell her about applications I'd submitted, interviews I'd scheduled, feedback I'd received. I thought this would satisfy her need to be involved, while allowing me to maintain control over the actual process. I should have known better. In February of my senior year, I interviewed for a program coordinator position at a nonprofit that worked with at-risk youth. The interview went really well, and I was excited about the possibility of working there after graduation. When I got home that evening, I told my mother all about it. "They're doing such important work," I said. "The woman I interviewed with, Maria, has been there for 8 years, and she loves it. She said they're looking for someone who's passionate about social justice and willing to learn." My mother listened politely, but I could tell she wasn't thrilled about the nonprofit angle. Still, when Maria called 2 weeks later to offer me the position, my mother seemed genuinely happy for me. "I'm proud of you," she said after I hung up the phone. "You handled that whole process so well." I should have been suspicious of how easily she accepted my decision. My mother was never that agreeable about things she disagreed with, but I was so relieved to have her support that I didn't question it. The job was set to start in June, a few weeks after graduation. I spent the rest of the semester wrapping up my coursework and preparing for the transition to full-time work. I was nervous but excited. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was making decisions based on what I actually wanted, not what someone else expected from me. Graduation day was beautiful, sunny and warm, with a light breeze that kept it from feeling too hot in our caps and gowns. I was excited but also emotional. College had been hard in ways I was only beginning to understand, but I'd made it through. I'd earned my degree. I'd figured out what I wanted to do with my life. My mother had invited what felt like half of Portland to watch me graduate. Not just immediate family, but cousins, family friends, people from church, neighbors. She'd ordered flowers, made dinner reservations, planned a whole celebration. "I'm so proud of you," she kept saying as we took pictures before the ceremony. "We did it. We actually did it." There was that word again, we. But I was too happy to let it bother me. I was graduating summa cum laude. I had a job lined up. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was supposed to be. The ceremony itself was a blur of names being called, caps being thrown, families cheering. When they called Charlotte Elizabeth Morrison, I walked across that stage, feeling like I was walking into my future. I shook hands with the dean, accepted my diploma, and looked out into the crowd to see my mother taking pictures with tears streaming down her face. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. 23 people crammed around a long table, passing around my diploma, making toasts, telling stories about watching me grow up. It should have been perfect, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Then I started paying attention to how my mother was talking about the experience. "This has been such a journey for us," she told my Aunt Karen. 4 years of hard work, but we made it through. "I'm so proud of what we've accomplished," she said to our neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "It's been challenging, balancing everything, but we never gave up," she told the woman sitting next to her. Someone I didn't even recognize. Every story, every reflection, every comment was about us and we. Like she'd been the one sitting in lecture halls and taking exams. Like she'd been the one writing papers and doing group projects. Like she'd been the one earning the degree. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being oversensitive. Maybe this was just her way of expressing pride and support. But then my cousin Jake made a toast. "To Charlotte and Aunt Linda," he said, raising his glass. "You both worked so hard for this moment. Charlotte in the classroom, and Aunt Linda behind the scenes, making sure everything went smoothly. It's been a team effort from day one." Everyone raised their glasses and drank to Charlotte and Aunt Linda, like we were co-graduates, like we'd both earned degrees that day. I felt sick to my stomach, but I smiled and thanked everyone and pretended like everything was normal. What else could I do? Make a scene at my own graduation dinner? Tell my extended family that I was upset about my mother being proud of me? But that night, lying in my childhood bed one last time before moving into my own apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been stolen from me. My graduation day, my accomplishment, my moment of triumph. Somehow it had become about her. I started my job at the nonprofit in June, and for a few weeks, things felt normal. My mother seemed to have accepted that I was an adult with my own career now. She called less frequently. She stopped showing up at my apartment unannounced. I thought maybe we'd finally found a healthy balance. Then Maria, my supervisor, mentioned that she'd received a call from my mother. "She just wanted to introduce herself," Maria said casually during one of our weekly check-ins. "She seems very supportive of your career." My heart sank. What did she say? "Nothing concerning. Just that she was proud of the work you're doing and wanted to make sure you were settling in well. She asked about your projects and mentioned that she has some experience in nonprofit administration." I felt that familiar burn of embarrassment. She doesn't have experience in nonprofit administration. She works in retail management. Maria looked surprised. Oh, I must have misunderstood. She talked about some of the donor relations work she'd been involved with during your internship. I assumed she'd worked in the nonprofit sector. My internship, the one I'd done completely on my own, but that my mother had somehow transformed into a shared experience in her mind. That evening, I called her. "Mom, did you contact my supervisor?" "I just wanted to introduce myself. Is that a crime?" "What did you tell her about your nonprofit experience?" There was a pause. I mentioned some of the things we learned during your internship. I thought it might be helpful context. "But you didn't do an internship, I did, and you weren't involved in any donor relations work." "Charlotte, you're being ridiculous. Of course I was involved. Who do you think helped you prepare for those meetings? Who helped you research the donors? Who stayed up late helping you practice your presentations?" I wanted to scream that none of that was true, that I'd done all of that work myself, in my own apartment, often while she was calling me to complain that I wasn't spending enough time at home. But I could hear the hurt in her voice, and I couldn't bring myself to push back harder. Maybe I was remembering things wrong. Maybe she had helped more than I realized. Maybe I was being ungrateful. So I let it go. Again. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work. I was good at it, and I loved it. I was helping coordinate programs for teenagers who were aging out of foster care, connecting them with resources and support systems. It was meaningful work, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was making a real difference in the world. My mother seemed proud of my job, but she also seemed to think it was temporary. She kept sending me job postings for corporate positions, just in case you change your mind. She'd make comments about how nonprofit work was admirable, but not very practical for the long term. But I wasn't interested in changing my mind. I was interested in getting better at what I was doing. I started taking evening classes in grant writing and nonprofit management. I attended conferences and workshops. I was building expertise in my field. And apparently, so was my mother. I found out by accident in November. I was having lunch with a college friend, Michelle, who worked at a different nonprofit across town. We were catching up on each other's lives when she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Oh, I met your mom at the Community Foundation Mixer last month," she said casually. "She's doing such interesting work in youth services. You two are like a nonprofit power duo." I almost choked on my sandwich. What mixer? The annual networking event. She was there representing her organization. I didn't catch the name of it, but she was talking about some innovative programs for at-risk youth. I was impressed by how knowledgeable she was about funding strategies and community partnerships. I felt dizzy. "Michelle, my mother doesn't work for a nonprofit. She's never worked for a nonprofit." Michelle looked confused. "Are you sure?" She had business cards and everything. She talked about her experience with program development and donor cultivation. She knew all the right terminology. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called my mother. "Did you go to a Community Foundation Mixer last month?" "Oh, you heard about that?" "Yes, I thought it would be good networking for us. You never know when connections like that might be helpful." "For us?" "For your career, I mean. I was just trying to learn more about the field so I could be supportive." "Michelle said you had business cards. She said you were representing an organization." There was a long pause. I may have misspoken about some things. I was nervous, and sometimes when I'm nervous, I don't explain myself very clearly. "What did you tell people?" "Nothing that wasn't true. I talked about the work you're doing, the programs you're involved with. I'm proud of you, Charlotte. I want people to know about the important things you're accomplishing." But that wasn't what Michelle had described. Michelle had described my mother presenting herself as a nonprofit professional, not as a proud parent talking about her daughter's work. "Mom, did you tell people that you work in nonprofit administration?" Another long pause. I think there may have been some confusion. People make assumptions sometimes, and it's hard to correct every misunderstanding in a casual conversation. She was lying. I knew she was lying, but I couldn't prove it. And I couldn't figure out why she would lie about something like this. What was the point of pretending to be someone she wasn't at a professional networking event? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times over the past few years when my mother had seemed to know too much about my school or my work. All the times she'd talked about my experiences like they were her experiences. All the times she'd used we when she should have said she. I started remembering other things too. How she'd always been jealous of my accomplishments, even as a kid. How she'd find ways to diminish my achievements or take credit for them. When I won a writing contest in high school, she told everyone it was because she'd helped me edit my essay, which wasn't true. When I got into college, she claimed it was because she'd helped me with my application, also not true. But this felt different. This felt bigger. This felt like she wasn't just trying to share in my success. She was trying to steal it entirely. I didn't confront her about the networking event. I was too confused, too hurt, too angry. Instead, I started pulling back. I stopped telling her as much about work. I stopped asking for her advice about professional decisions. I started screening her calls and responding to her texts less frequently. She noticed the change immediately. "You're being distant again," she said, when I came over for Sunday dinner in December. "Just like you were in college. I thought we'd moved past this phase." "I'm not being distant. I'm just busy with work." "Too busy for your mother? Too busy for the person who sacrificed everything to help you get where you are?" There it was again, the guilt. The reminder of everything I owed her, the suggestion that wanting independence was the same as being ungrateful. But this time, I didn't give in. "Mom, I need some space." I need to figure out how to live my own life. What does that mean? Are you ashamed of me? Are you embarrassed by your family? No, I just need to be my own person. I need to have my own accomplishments and my own relationships and my own identity. She started crying. Real tears, not the manipulative kind. I don't understand what I did wrong, she sobbed. I've always supported you. I've always been proud of you. I don't know why you're pushing me away. I felt terrible. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was being cruel to someone who really did love me and just didn't know how to express it in healthy ways. So I backed down, again. But I also started paying closer attention to what she was doing and saying. I started asking more questions when she mentioned being at events or meeting people. I started fact-checking her stories when she talked about her activities and accomplishments. What I discovered made me feel sick. My mother had been systematically building a false identity for herself based on my education and career. She'd been attending professional events in the nonprofit sector and presenting herself as an experienced administrator. She'd been volunteering for organizations and exaggerating her qualifications. She'd been networking with people in my field and implying that she had expertise she didn't actually possess. The worst part was that she was good at it. She'd absorbed enough information from our conversations over the years to speak knowledgeably about nonprofit management, youth services, and community development. She could talk about grant writing and program evaluation and board governance because she'd been listening to me talk about these things for months. But she was talking about them as if she'd learned them through her own experience, not through me. In January, I found out she'd applied for a real job, at a nonprofit in Vancouver, Washington, a program director position that required a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience in the field. I only found out because the executive director of the organization, Dr. Roberts, called me at work. "Charlotte, I hope you don't mind me reaching out," she said. "Your mother listed you as a reference on her job application, and I wanted to ask you a few questions about her background." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "I'm sorry, what job application?" "She's applied for our program director position. She has an impressive resume. Bachelor's degree from Portland State. Experience in youth services, strong references. I was hoping you could tell me more about working with her at your current organization." I couldn't speak for a moment. I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Dr. Roberts, I think there's been a misunderstanding. My mother doesn't work at my organization. She's never worked at my organization." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm confused," Dr. Roberts said finally. Her resume indicates several years of experience in nonprofit administration, including her current position as a program coordinator. She specifically mentioned working on youth development initiatives and donor relations. "That's my job," I said quietly. "Those are my responsibilities. I think she's been claiming my experience as her own." Another long silence. "Charlotte, I'm going to need to call you back," Dr. Roberts said. "I need to review this application more carefully." After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall for 20 minutes. My mother had stolen my resume. She'd stolen my education, my experience, my entire professional identity. She'd been pretending to be me, or maybe she'd been pretending I was her. I drove straight to her house after work. I didn't call first. I just showed up and let myself in with the key I'd had since high school. She was in the kitchen, making dinner and humming to herself. She looked up when I walked in, and her face lit up with that familiar, loving smile. "Charlotte, what a nice surprise. Are you staying for dinner?" "I need to ask you something," I said, and something in my voice made her expression change. "Okay," she said carefully. "Did you apply for a job at Northwest Family Services?" Her face went white. "How did you—" "The executive director called me. She said you listed me as a reference. She said you claimed to have experience working at my organization." My mother set down the wooden spoon she'd been holding and turned to face me fully. "I can explain." "Then explain. Explain how you thought it was okay to lie about having my job. Explain how you thought it was okay to claim my college degree and my work experience as your own." "It's not what you think." "What is it then? Because it sounds like fraud to me." She started crying again, but this time I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt angry, angrier than I'd ever been in my life. "I just wanted to see if I could do it," she said, through her tears. "I wanted to know if I was smart enough, if I could be successful like you are." "So you decided to steal my identity?" "I wasn't stealing anything. I was just trying to imagine what it would feel like to be you." The words hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't trying to be proud of me or live vicariously through me. She was trying to be me. She was trying to erase me and replace me with herself. Mom, that's not normal. That's not healthy. That's not love. Of course it's love. Everything I've done has been because I love you. No, I said. And I felt something shift inside me, some fundamental understanding about our relationship, about who she was and who I was, clicked into place. Everything you've done has been because you're jealous of me, because you want what I have, because you can't stand the idea that I might be more successful than you are. That's not true. It is true. You've been competing with me my entire life. You've been trying to take credit for my accomplishments because you don't have any of your own. She was sobbing now, but I couldn't stop. 22 years of confusion and guilt and self-doubt were pouring out of me. You couldn't let me have my own college experience because you wanted to be the one going to college. You couldn't let me have my own graduation because you wanted to be the one graduating. You couldn't let me have my own career because you wanted to be the one with the career. I sacrificed everything for you. No, you didn't. You controlled everything about me. There's a difference. I left that night and didn't speak to her for 3 weeks. I needed time to think, to process what I'd learned about her and about myself. During those 3 weeks, I did something I'd never done before. I talked to other people about what had happened. I called my college friend Jessica and told her about the fake job application. I talked to my supervisor Maria about my mother's inappropriate contact with donors and networking events. I even called Professor Williams, my old social policy instructor, and asked her if she remembered our conversation about figuring out what I wanted for myself. Of course I remember, she said. You looked so lost when I asked you that question. But Charlotte, look at you now. You figured it out. You built a career you love. You're making a difference in people's lives. You did that. But what if I didn't? What if everything I think I accomplished was really just my mother pulling strings behind the scenes? Do you really believe that? Do you really think someone else could have sat through your classes, written your papers, taken your exams, learned your job skills? When she put it that way, it sounded ridiculous. Of course my mother hadn't done those things. Of course I'd earned my degree and built my career skills through my own work, but she'd tried so hard to convince me otherwise. She'd tried so hard to make me believe that my successes belonged to her, that I couldn't achieve anything without her involvement. And for 22 years, I'd believed her. The thing that finally made everything clear was a conversation I had with my Aunt Karen. She called me near the end of those 3 weeks to check in and see how I was doing. Your mother is worried about you, she said. She says you two had some kind of argument. I found myself telling her the whole story. The fake job application, the networking events, the years of taking credit for my accomplishments. I expected her to defend my mother, to tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she was quiet for a long time. Charlotte, she said finally, your mother has always had a hard time with other people's success, even when we were kids. If I got a good grade or won an award or made the basketball team, she'd find some way to diminish it or make it about herself. She did? Oh, honey, I thought you knew. I thought you'd figured out that this was just how she was. I thought she was just proud of me. I thought she was just involved. Pride looks different than what your mother does. Pride is celebrating someone else's achievements without needing to take credit for them. After that conversation, everything made sense. My mother wasn't proud of me. She was envious of me. She wasn't supportive. She was possessive. She wasn't invested in my success. She was trying to steal it. I called her on a Tuesday evening in February. I want to talk, I said, when she answered. Oh, Charlotte, I'm so glad you called. I've been so worried. I need you to listen to me, I interrupted. I need you to really hear what I'm saying. Okay. I know what you've been doing. I know about the networking events and the fake resume and all the times you've presented my accomplishments as your own, and I need it to stop. Charlotte, I'm not finished. I need you to understand that what you've been doing isn't love. It's theft. You've been stealing my identity because you're unhappy with your own life. She was quiet. I love you, I continued, but I can't have a relationship with you if you keep trying to take credit for my life. I can't be around someone who sees my success as a threat to their own self-worth. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to be part of my life, you need to get help. You need to talk to someone about why you can't let me be my own person, and you need to stop lying about your background and qualifications. And if I don't, I took a deep breath. Then I'll have to cut contact with you, completely. She started crying again, but this time I didn't back down. You can't do that to me, she sobbed. I'm your mother, you can't abandon me. I'm not abandoning you, I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. We hung up, and I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my life, I'd set a clear boundary with my mother. I told her exactly what I needed from her, and I'd been honest about the consequences if she couldn't give it to me. It's been 6 months since that conversation. My mother did start seeing a therapist, which surprised me. She also sent me a long letter apologizing for overstepping boundaries and not respecting your independence. She didn't acknowledge the full extent of what she'd done, but it was a start. We talk once a week now, on Sunday afternoons. Short conversations about neutral topics like work and weather and what we're reading. She doesn't ask invasive questions about my job anymore. She doesn't show up at my apartment unannounced. She doesn't introduce herself to my colleagues or try to attend my professional events. It's not the relationship I wish we could have. I wish I had a mother who could celebrate my accomplishments without needing to claim them. I wish I had a mother who could support my independence without feeling threatened by it. I wish I had a mother who could love me without trying to control me. But I have something I'd never had before: clarity. I know who I am separate from her. I know what I've accomplished on my own. I know that my education belongs to me, my career belongs to me, my future belongs to me. And I know that no one, not even my mother, can take that away from me again.